I have been using PowerPoint for over 20 years now, and every now and then I will come across a feature I have no idea existed in PowerPoint. So in this video, I thought I will compile a list of 10 features which you may not necessarily know, but once you learn about them, they can be useful. So starting with number 1, recent files. If I go to file menu, you will notice that here PowerPoint shows recently accessed files. Now you can control how many files you want shown here. So you can have as low as 0 files shown here or as many as 50. I typically like to keep this setting to a minimum. So depending on what you prefer, you can either increase the default setting or decrease it or just keep it as it is. To change that setting, click on this options button at the bottom left corner. Then go to advanced, scroll down. Under display, you will have this option called show this number of recent presentations. So I have set this at 2, but you can go from 0 to 50. One thing to note here is just because you lowered the setting does not mean that the recently accessed file information is lost. PowerPoint still stores that in its cache. It's just that it's not displaying that to you beyond the setting that you have here. The second feature is the undo setting. Now by default, I think the number of undos you can have in PowerPoint is set at 20. So you can undo your actions back to last 20 actions. However, you can crank that up all the way to 150. So I see no reason why we should limit number of undos to 20. I like to keep it at the maximum because I do a lot of formatting changes in my presentations. So I like the ability to go back as far as I can. To change that setting, again, click on options, click on advanced, then right at the top here, you will see the option called maximum number of undos. So I would recommend change this to a maximum. You can have as little as 3 undos, but I don't know why you would have lower number of undos. I would just keep this to a maximum value. Number 3, auto recover setting. In the modern times, usually PowerPoint or any other software has some way of auto saving the progress you have made. That said, on desktop based softwares, that setting may still be limited to a specific time. So how frequently your progress is saved. In PowerPoint, the default setting is usually at 10 minutes. So PowerPoint will save your file automatically every 10 minutes. So in case your file closes without saving, you can recover the progress from the last save, which would be sometime in the last 10 minutes. What I like to do is reduce that setting. So you can find that option by going to File, then click on Options again, and go to the Save tab. And here you will notice there is an option to change that setting. I like to set this to 5 minutes because I'm a bit paranoid about my progress. I do a lot of formatting changes and a lot of graphic design. So I'm afraid of losing any changes at all. So I like to keep this to as low as possible without limiting the performance of my file. So I think 5 minutes seems reasonable. Feel free to change this to any value you like, but I would suggest you keep this to a lower setting as well. Number 4, disabling the proofing options. Now let's take an example like this, where I have created a sample slide layout, which I want to share with someone. But as you'll notice, the text I have is a placeholder text and not actual text. If I need to take a screenshot of this, the screenshot will have all these red underlines because PowerPoint thinks that these are spelling mistakes. However, I know that this is just a placeholder text, so there are no mistakes. So while taking the screenshots, it's annoying to know that these underlines also come with them and sort of messes up my screenshots. So how do I disable that? It's easy. You go to File, click on Options again, then click on this Proofing tab, and right at the bottom you have this option called Hide Spelling and Grammar Errors. So when I want to take screenshots, I just hide these errors and you will see that they have disappeared here. Then I'll take the screenshot and then I'll go back here again and re-enable that option. So it's a convenient option to have for scenario I just described. At number 5, default chart. Let me go to a blank slide Now if I insert a chart, you will notice that by default this goes to this specific clustered column chart. Now depending on your situation, if this is not a chart that you use frequently, you can change that setting. In my case, I tend to use horizontal bar chart much more frequently. So what I can do is click on this bar chart option, then click on the chart that I like to be opened up as default, right click and click on set as default, then cancel, go back to insert, click on chart again, and you will see that it opens up with the bar chart option by default. So it's a minor feature, but it can be useful in the long run. At number 6, chart template. Let's create a horizontal bar chart. PowerPoint opens up a default chart like so. Now I cannot use this as is in my presentations because there are several changes I will need to do in order to make this work in my workflow. For example, I typically work with percentages. I don't use the default chart title text box. My colors would mostly be different. I also don't use grid lines. To give you an example, a typical chart I work with looks something like this. As you can see, there are several formatting changes I have made to this chart. So I have changed the font sizes, I have changed the axis from numbers to percentages, I have moved the legend here and rearranged it vertically versus horizontally. I have also removed the grid lines. Whenever I want to use a horizontal bar chart in my presentations, I really have one option available, which is to save this chart somewhere in some presentation, and every time I want to use this chart, copy that presentation and then use it in my presentation. However, there is a second option available to us. We can save this chart as a template. So PowerPoint will save this chart with all its external formatting changes like the axis, the font size, the colors, the legend, etc. It won't save the data inside the chart in the template, but anything formatting wise will be saved in the template. And then the next time you want to use this chart, you can use the template instead of the default chart option, and that would save you from having to make these formatting changes again. To save this chart as template, you just right click on the chart and click on this option called save as template. I have saved this chart already, so I'm just going to click on this and override that. Now let's say we want to create a new horizontal bar chart on this slide. So go to insert, click on chart. Now instead of clicking on the default chart here, go to this option called templates. You'll see that our chart template is saved here. So click on that, click OK, and you'll see that all our formatting changes have been applied to this chart. As I mentioned, it does not save the values inside the chart, so we'll still have to edit these values here. But as for formatting, most of the changes we wanted have been carried into this chart. So this can be a useful feature if you reuse certain charts over and over again in a specific formatting. Next, replacing fonts. Now this is something I knew existed. However, because I'm used to changing every slide manually, I tend to forget this option is actually a super useful option. So let's say in this entire presentation, I want to replace this Calibri Light font that I've used for all these title slides with Calibri. Now there are 10 such slides. Instead of going to each slide and manually changing the fonts, go to this option replace fonts, which is under home menu. Click on it. Now in this replace drop down box is where you want to select the font you need replaced. So in our case, we want to replace all the Calibri Light with Calibri. So under with drop down box, select Calibri, then click on replace. Within a fraction of a second, it would have replaced all the Calibri Lights in our presentation with Calibri. So you'll notice that this is now Calibri. So this can be a super time saver option if you remember to use it. I often forget it, but I thought I will cover this, so any of you find this useful, at least you can save some time. At number 8, how to access objects using selection panel. Now I have this example here. Now you'll notice that there are a bunch of objects on this slide. I want to change this green rectangle I have here to a light blue. However, if I go here, there is this shape here on top. So I will have to get that out of the way or send that to the back. Then I again try to select this green rectangle, but a table is on top of it. So now I have to get the table out of the way as well, and then I can get access to that. So this can get really messy the more objects you have on a slide. So there is an easy way to get access to this object. Under home menu, click on this select option and then select this third option called selection pane. On the right hand side, it shows all the objects we have on this slide. Now, since we are interested in this rectangle, let's locate a rectangle object. You'll notice that there are 4 rectangle objects on this slide. So one is of course this, then there is this invisible shape on top, and then there are these 2 gray rectangles. So we need to locate of these 4 which one is our green one. It's quite easy. Just click on each of these rectangles until it highlights the rectangle we want. So the first one is this invisible rectangle and the very next one is the green one. So once it's selected, right click, bring it to front, change it to the color you want, then send it to back again. And just like that, we can easily get access to any objects and change them without much hassle. The next feature is again related to selection pane. So you can hide or lock certain objects on your slide. So continuing with the same example, let's say we want to hide this green rectangle because it's no longer serving the purpose. First, you will have to select it. So now that we know this rectangle 2 is that rectangle, on the right hand side, you see this eye icon here. Just click on it and you will notice that our object has just disappeared. Even in the full screen mode, you can no longer see it. So this is a great way to hide objects on a slide without having to delete them. So in the future, if you change your mind and you want that enabled, you'll just have to go here and display it again like so. You will also notice that there is this lock icon next to it. Let's say we have these gray rectangles that are behind these charts. Now every time I try to work with these charts, I don't want this gray rectangle to be moved or changed. So what I can do is I can just select those rectangles and I can lock them by clicking on this lock icon. Let's do that for the second one as well. And let's see what happens. So if I move the chart now, the chart moves. However, I can no longer move this rectangle anymore. So this is also a useful option when you have a ton of objects on your slide and whenever you try to work with them, the shapes get disturbed or they just move every time you try to make changes to something else. So to make your life easier, you can effectively use this object locking feature. And lastly, at number 10, taming the designer. What do I mean by that? Let's open up a blank slide. Let me add a picture. So go to stock images. I don't know, let's add this toothbrush image here. And the moment I added this picture, PowerPoint Designer has just offered me a bunch of options and I have no intention of using any of these, but it's just annoying that it's occupied this space on the right and it just distracts me from my workflow. So how do I disable this behavior where I only want to use Designer when I want to use it and I don't want it to show up on the right by default? To do that, go back to File, click on Options. Under General menu, scroll down. You will notice there is this option called PowerPoint Designer. Uncheck this box called Automatically Show Me Design Ideas. Then click OK. Now let's repeat the same action again. So let me first delete this picture and go back to Insert, click on Pictures, click on Stock Images. Let's reselect this picture, click on Insert. And now you'll see that the designer option is no longer coming up by default. If you still want this option, you can go to home menu and click on this designer button. And now it will show you these options when you want them to be shown and not by default. So if you want this turned back on, you can go back to File menu, click on Options, under General, locate PowerPoint Designer, check this option, click OK. Let's see if our designer option comes back up automatically. And there, the designer option is back at it again. So how many of these you knew and how many you didn't? Leave that in the comment. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe for future videos, and I will catch you next time.